He slammed his fist on the front desk so hard the ceramic lamp tipped over. "There has to be another room. Any room. A broom closet. I don't care." The clerk flinched. Behind him, a woman in a wheelchair didn't even look up from her phone. "There isn't," she said flatly. "I already asked. Twice." Daniel Reed, 44 years old, soaking wet, and 300 miles from home in a blizzard, turned around slowly and stared at the most powerful woman he'd never wanted to meet. What happened in that suite over the next 12 hours would change both of them in ways neither of them saw coming. Drop your city in the comments right now. Let's see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. You're going to want to be here for this one. The fist came down before Daniel even thought about it. It wasn't like him. He was a man who fixed things quietly. Engines busted, transmissions, busted budgets. A man who absorbed pressure the way a good piston ring absorbs heat. Steady, contained. He didn't slam his hands on desks. He didn't make scenes. But tonight wasn't like other nights. Tonight, his truck was buried hood-deep in a snowdrift on the eastern face of the Rockies. Tonight, his 7-year-old daughter Lily was 312 miles away with his sister in Denver, waiting on a phone call that said, "Daddy's okay." Tonight, Daniel Reed was standing in a mountain lodge wearing soaked jeans, a flannel shirt that smelled like motor oil and wet dog, and the expression that said he was one wrong answer away from losing what little composure he had left. The young clerk behind the desk couldn't have been more than 22, blinked up at him like a man watching a tree fall in his direction. "Sir, I understand your frustration, but we truly only have one suite," Daniel said. "Yeah, you said that." "With 2 separate beds," the clerk added, as if that would help. "It's a large suite, and the other guest has already been checked in," said a voice behind him. "Yes, she has." Daniel turned. The woman in the wheelchair was parked 6 feet back from the desk, arms folded, phone face down on her lap. She was looking at him now, and she was not impressed. She was maybe 40, maybe 42. Dark hair pulled back tight, sharp cheekbones, eyes the color of good charcoal gray, and hard and exhausted in equal measure. She wore a blazer that probably cost more than Daniel's truck payment, and she held herself with the kind of stillness that doesn't come from peace. It comes from practice, from years of teaching yourself not to flinch. She said, "You're dripping on the floor." Daniel looked down. She was right. A small puddle had formed around his boots. "Yeah," he said. "Snowstorm'll do that." "The room has 2 beds," she said. "I'm not thrilled about it either, but the alternative is you sleeping in your truck, which given the temperature outside would make for a very short story." Daniel stared at her. "You're serious?" "I'm always serious." He looked back at the clerk, who had the expression of a man praying to be somewhere else. "Is there truly nothing else?" "Mr. Reed," the clerk said carefully. "The storm closed the pass at 6 p.m. We have 42 guests. Every room, every cot, every pull-out we have is occupied. The suite is the only space with 2 actual beds. I can put a privacy screen between them if—" "Don't bother," the woman in the wheelchair said. She was already turning wheels, rolling smooth and quiet on the hardwood. "Room 14. I'll leave the door unlocked for 10 minutes. After that, I'm bolting it, and you're on your own." She moved toward the hallway without waiting for an answer. Daniel watched her go. "Who is that?" he asked the clerk, quiet. The clerk leaned in like he was sharing classified information. "Adriana Vale, the CEO of Meridian Group." Daniel had never heard of Meridian Group. He wasn't sure if that made him feel better or worse. He picked up his bag and followed her. The suite was as promised large. Two queen beds on opposite ends of the room, a sitting area in the middle with a couch and a low coffee table. A wide bathroom with a roll-in shower. A desk under the window where snow was pressing itself against the glass like it wanted in. Adriana Vale was already at the desk, laptop open. A phone pressed between her shoulder and her ear. She glanced at Daniel when he came through the door, then looked back at her screen. "I don't care what Martinez said," she was saying into the phone. "The clause is in Section 7, Paragraph 4. Read it to him again, slowly, in whatever language he prefers." A pause. "No extensions. Tell them I said the deadline is the deadline because I put it there myself." Daniel set his bag down by the far bed, pulled off his boots, set them neatly by the wall. He wasn't a man who made extra mess in other people's spaces. He sat on the edge of the mattress and rubbed his hands over his face. Lily, he thought. I should call Lily. He pulled out his phone, 1 bar of service. He tried his sister's number. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. "Hey Sarah, it's me. I'm okay, truck's done. I'm stuck at a lodge on 36 until the pass opens. Tell Lily I love her, and I'll call in the morning. Tell her..." He paused. "Tell her I found a warm place. She'll want to know that." He hung up. Across the room, Adriana was still on the phone. Her voice hadn't changed, same flat authority, same measured cadence. But her left hand resting on the arm of her wheelchair had curled into a fist. Daniel noticed that. He wasn't sure why. He went to the bathroom, changed into dry clothes, hung his wet jeans over the towel rack. When he came back out, she was off the phone. The laptop was still open, but she wasn't looking at it. She was looking at the window. The snow was coming down in sheets now. In the lamplight, it looked almost beautiful. Almost. "There's a restaurant downstairs," Daniel said. "Closes at 9. It's 1:45. Adriana didn't look at him. "I'm aware." "I'm going down. You want something?" Now she looked at him, like the question surprised her, like she was trying to figure out if it was a trick. "Why would you?" "Because it's almost 9 o'clock. I haven't eaten since 11 this morning, and asking costs me nothing," Daniel said. "Burger soup?" "They've probably got soup." Adriana Vale looked at him for a long moment with those hard gray eyes. "Chicken soup," she said finally. "If they have it." "And if they don't, then whatever they have that isn't a burger. I don't eat red meat." "Noted." He grabbed his wallet and went downstairs. They had chicken soup. They also had grilled chicken sandwiches, which Daniel ordered for himself, and a basket of bread that the waitress threw in because she said, "It's a bad night to be stingy." He carried everything up on a tray the kitchen staff loaned him. When he pushed through the suite door with his elbow, Adriana looked up from the laptop with the expression of someone recalibrating. "You actually went?" she said. "Said I would." He set the tray on the coffee table, pulled 2 paper napkins from his jacket pocket he'd grabbed extras, and put the soup in front of her side of the table. She wheeled herself over slowly, like she was considering whether this counted as accepting a favor. They ate in silence for a while. Daniel wasn't a man who talked to fill space. He'd learned years ago after Caroline died that silence wasn't the enemy. Silence was just the space where things were allowed to be what they were. It was Adriana who spoke first. "Your boots," she said. He looked up. "What about them?" "Steel-toed, grease line at the heel. You're a mechanic." Was that a question? No. Then yeah, I am. He took a bite of his sandwich. "And you already know what I am, which means you asked the clerk." Something shifted in her face. Not quite a smile, more like the ghost of one passing through. "He volunteers information," she said. "He does," Daniel agreed. Another silence. Comfortable enough this time. "Single father," she said. He looked at her. "He told you that too?" Your voicemail. I heard you mention Lily. He wasn't sure how he felt about that, but he didn't see any cruelty in her face. Just observation. The kind of person who files everything away automatically by reflex. 7 years old, he said. She's with my sister. Denver. Denver. Adriana nodded once. She wrapped her hands around the soup cup, both hands like she needed the warmth, and stared at the table. I have a board meeting in 14 hours, she said. It wasn't a complaint. It was just a fact she was laying out. In Denver. In Denver, Meridian's regional office. The storm wasn't in the forecast until this afternoon. Storms rarely ask permission, Daniel said. She looked at him. That ghost of a smile again, quicker this time. No, they don't. He watched her drink her soup. There was something methodical about the way she moved, every motion deliberate, nothing wasted. He understood that. After 3 years of doing everything alone, dropping Lily at school, picking her up, cooking dinner, fixing every broken thing in the house, and every broken thing a stranger brought into his shop, he understood the economy of deliberate movement. How long? He asked. He didn't gesture at the wheelchair. He didn't need to. 6 years, she said. No hesitation. Like she'd answered the question 1,000 times and made peace with it 1,000 times and still answered it 1,000 times more. Car accident. I was 28 miles outside of San Francisco on a consulting trip. Someone ran a red light at 60 miles an hour. I'm sorry. Don't be, she said, and the way she said it wasn't cold. It was just closed. A door that had been shut for so long it didn't swing anymore. It's mine now. The chair is mine. This is just what it is. Daniel nodded. He didn't push. Your wife, she said. He went still. You said was when you mentioned your sister, like the arrangement used to be different. He put his sandwich down. 3 years ago, cancer, fast kind. Adriana didn't say I'm sorry either. Instead, she said, how old was Lily? 4. Adriana was quiet for a moment. Does she remember her? Some, he said. She remembers her voice. She remembers a yellow sweater Caroline used to wear. She asks about it sometimes. He picked his sandwich back up. Kids hold on to strange things. They hold on to what they can reach, Adriana said quietly. Something in the way she said it made Daniel look at her differently. Not like a CEO. Not like the woman who'd told him he was dripping on the floor. Like someone who had also at some point grabbed for something and barely caught it. You have kids? He asked. No. Family. She took a slow drink of her soup. A mother in Scottsdale who sends me motivational texts every Tuesday. A brother in Austin who I talk to twice a year. She paused. And 300 employees who depend on a deal I have to close in 14 hours, which I'm not sure I can close. Daniel sat back. The merger. She looked at him sharply. The clerk. He volunteers information, Daniel said. Her jaw tightened for just a second. Then she exhaled through her nose something he'd come to recognize in the next few hours as the sound she made when she found something actually funny, but refused to let it become a full laugh. The merger, she confirmed. We've been working on it for 19 months. And the lead investor, a man named Hargrove, decided 48 hours ago that he wanted to renegotiate the primary valuation. Which means either we accept a 15% reduction in what our people get paid out, or we walk away from the whole thing. And your board wants to take the cut, Daniel said. She stared at him. How? Because boards always want to take the cut, he said. They want stability. They want done. They're not thinking about the 15%, they're thinking about the 95% they're keeping. Adriana Vale set her soup cup down. She looked at Daniel Reed, a mechanic from a snowstorm, sitting on her rented couch, wearing a clean flannel shirt and wet sock expression, and for the first time since she'd checked into this lodge, she was actually seeing him. "You've been in business," she said. It wasn't a question this time. "I had a partner once," Daniel said. "Shop we built together. He wanted to sell fast, take the first offer. I wanted to hold out for something fair. He took the deal without telling me." He looked at his food. "That's the story." "What happened?" "I started over. Alone. A beat. Which is how I know the men who say take the cut are the same men who always end up keeping the most." The room was quiet. Outside, the storm pressed against the glass and howled low and long like something alive and restless. Adriana stared at the table for a long moment. Then she said something Daniel hadn't expected. "I don't know if I can do it anymore." Her voice didn't break. It didn't even waver. But the words came out of her like something she'd been holding under her sternum for a very long time. And now, in a suite she hadn't planned to share with a mechanic from Denver, in the middle of a storm she hadn't predicted, it just slipped loose. "The merger," he asked carefully. "All of it." He didn't say anything. He'd learned with Lily that some things needed space more than they needed an answer. "I've been running Meridian for 11 years, she said. 11 years. I've been in this chair for 6 of them. Do you know what it takes?" She stopped, pressed her lips together. "People see the chair before they see the company. They see the chair before they see anything I've built. I have had men, grown men, senior partners talk to whoever is standing next to me instead of talking to me. I have had investors ask my CFO, who is 26 years old, whether I'm still sharp enough to run point. I have eaten those moments, every single one of them. And I kept going. I kept building. Because the work mattered. And now," Daniel said quietly. Adriana lifted her eyes from the table. They were dry. She was not a woman who cried in front of strangers, but something behind them, something deep and tired, was moving. "Now I'm sitting in a snowstorm in Colorado with a man I've never met before," she said. "And I just told him something I haven't told my CFO, my board, my therapist, or my brother." "That you're tired," Daniel said. "That I'm tired," she agreed. The word sat between them, heavy and real and clean, the way honest things always are. Daniel reached across the table and picked up the bread basket. He put it a little closer to her side. "Eat something else," he said. "It's been a long day." She looked at him. Then she reached out and took a piece of bread. And for a few minutes in the eye of the storm, they just ate. It was past 11 when Daniel finally lay down. He'd given Adriana the bathroom first without discussion, just stepped aside and opened the door and said, "Take your time," in the tone of a man who meant it. She'd gone in, and he'd heard water running, and when she came back out 20 minutes later, she was in a dark gray sleep shirt, and her hair was down, and she looked somehow smaller. Not weaker, just more herself. She'd transferred from the chair to the bed with a practiced efficiency that Daniel had made a point not to stare at, not from discomfort, but from respect. That was her business, her body, her routine. He'd gone in after her, washed up, come back out, and gotten into the far bed. "Good night," he said. A pause. "Good night," she said. He closed his eyes. He thought about Lily, about the yellow sweater, about the way Caroline used to hum while she made coffee in the morning, a habit so quiet he'd never even commented on it while she was alive, and now he would give almost anything to hear it again for 30 seconds. He thought about the shop, about the truck buried in the snow, about the 8 a.m. engine job he was going to have to reschedule, and the client who was not going to take it well. He thought briefly about the woman 12 feet away who had told him, a complete stranger, that she was tired. He understood tired. He understood it in his bones. Sleep pulled him under fast, the way it does when a body has been running too long on not enough. He didn't know what woke him. It wasn't loud. It was the opposite of loud. It was the sound of someone trying very hard not to make a sound. Daniel opened his eyes. The room was dark. The clock on the nightstand read 2:47 a.m. Across the room, in the direction of Adriana's bed, he heard it again, a careful, controlled exhale. The kind that comes out when you're fighting something down, when you're losing and trying not to show it even to yourself. He lay still. He heard her phone light up, then dim, then light up again as she read something. Then the sound of her setting it face down on the mattress, hard sudden, like she couldn't stand to look at it anymore. And then a sound that was barely a sound at all. A breath that broke. Just once, just for a second, then caught and controlled and buried again. But Daniel had heard it. He lay there in the dark and made a decision that he couldn't entirely explain. Not then. Maybe not ever. He said quietly into the darkness, "You don't have to hold it that tight." Silence. Then, "I thought you were asleep." "I was." Another long silence. "Go back to sleep," she said. "Can't," he said. "Once I'm up, I'm up." Hazard of being a light sleeper with a 7-year-old. Adriana didn't say anything, but she didn't tell him to stop talking. Daniel stared at the ceiling. "My wife," he said, "used to say that the hardest part of being strong is that everyone believes you. Nobody checks on you, nobody asks, because you've made it so convincing." The dark was quiet. Then from across the room, Adriana Vale said very quietly, almost below the threshold of hearing, "Hargrove pulled the offer entirely. Tonight. 2 hours ago. 19 months of work. 300 people who were counting on this deal. And he just..." She stopped. "He sent a 1-paragraph email at 12:30 a.m. and said the valuation risk was no longer acceptable." Daniel was quiet for a moment. Did he give a reason? He gave a line. Lines aren't reasons. "What does your board say?" A sound that might have been a short laugh if laughing and breaking down weren't the same thing right now. "I haven't told them yet. I'm supposed to walk in there in 7 hours and tell 300 people." She stopped. "I don't know what I'm supposed to tell them." Daniel sat up in the dark. He didn't cross the room. He didn't go to her. He just sat on the edge of his bed, elbows on knees, in the direction of her voice. "Adriana," he said. It was the first time he'd used her name. She'd heard him say it. She must have it landed in the room like something new. "What?" she said. Not a question, almost defiant, like she was bracing. "What do the people at Meridian actually need from you tomorrow?" A long pause. "What?" "Not the board, not Hargrove, your people, the 300. What do they actually need from you in that room in 7 hours?" Adriana was quiet for so long that Daniel thought she might have stopped listening. Then she said, "They need to know someone is still standing." "Okay," Daniel said. "Then that's what you give them. You don't have to have the answer tonight. You just have to still be standing in the morning." The darkness between them breathed. "That's not a strategy," she said finally. "No," Daniel said. "It's something better than a strategy." She didn't answer, but a minute later he heard her move, just the quiet shift of her settling back against the pillows. The phone stayed face down. Daniel lay back down. He looked at the ceiling. "Get some sleep," he said. 7 hours is still enough if you use them right." A long pause. Then so quiet, he almost missed it. "Thank you." He closed his eyes. The storm outside was still going, wind pressing the glass, snow piling against everything it touched. But inside room 14, something had gone quiet that had been loud all night. Not resolved, not fixed, not answered. Just allowed to be still. And sometimes Daniel Reed had learned that's the only thing a person actually needs. Daniel was already awake when the first gray light came through the gap in the curtains. He hadn't slept much after 2:47. Maybe 2 hours, maybe less. But he'd learned in the 3 years since Caroline died that lying still in the dark counted for something. Your body rested even when your mind refused to. He lay on his back and listened to the lodge. The storm had quieted. Not gone, just pulled back. The kind of pause a blizzard takes before deciding what to do next. He could hear the radiator ticking. Somewhere down the hall, a door opened and closed. Across the room, Adriana was still asleep. He could tell by her breathing slower now, more even than it had been at 2:47. He didn't look. He just listened the way you listen for a child in the next room, not to intrude, but to confirm. Still okay. Still here. He got up carefully, went to the bathroom, splashed water on his face and looked at himself in the mirror. He looked like a man who'd slept in a stranger's suite during a snowstorm, which was accurate. He ran a hand over his jaw, 2 days of gray coming in strong, and decided the situation wasn't improving with more staring. When he came back out, she was awake. She was sitting up in bed, phone in her hand, not reading it, just holding it, staring at the wall. Her hair was still down, still tangled from sleep, and for just a second, before she registered that he was there, he saw her face completely unguarded. It was the face of someone doing math in their head. Hard math. The kind that doesn't add up no matter how many times you run it. Then she noticed him, and it closed back up, not hostile, just habitual. The armor went on the way. A coat goes on in cold weather. Automatically, without thinking. "Coffee," she said. It wasn't a request. More like a diagnosis. "Downstairs," he said. "I'll go." "I can go down myself." "I know you can." He picked up his room key from the nightstand. "I'm going anyway. Black or—" "Black," she said. "2 cups." "2 cups," he repeated, and went out the door without making it a thing. The restaurant downstairs was half full of stranded guests, who all wore the same look, the slightly unreal expression of people living inside a pause. A trucker in a booth by the window was working on his 3rd plate of eggs. A young couple near the back was arguing in low voices about something that probably wasn't the storm. A retired-looking man in a cardigan was doing a crossword at the counter with total serenity, like he'd been waiting years for an excuse to stop moving. Daniel ordered 2 black coffees, a plate of eggs and toast for himself, and after a moment's consideration, a 2nd plate of eggs and wheat toast for Adriana. He didn't ask. She'd told him she didn't eat red meat. That was enough to work with. When he got back upstairs, she was in her chair, dressed same kind of sharp blazer as yesterday, dark navy, this time, hair pulled back, laptop open. But she wasn't typing. Her hands were in her lap, and she was staring at the screen like it owed her something it wasn't paying. He set the coffee and the plate on the table in front of her. She looked at the eggs. "I didn't order these." "You didn't order the soup last night either," he said, sitting down across from her with his own plate. "Seems to be working okay so far." A pause. Then she picked up the fork. They ate without talking for a few minutes. The coffee was decent, better than it had any right to be at a mountain lodge in a snowstorm. Daniel drank his slowly and watched the window where snow was still coming down, but lighter now. Slower. "The pass opens at 10, she said. "Weather service updated an hour ago." "I saw." "Your truck." Lodge called a tow at 6 a.m., he said. Should be here by 9:30. I'll have it running before 11. She looked at him over her coffee cup. You're sure of that? It's my truck. I know what's wrong with it. He took a bite of toast. Fuel line froze. Common in these temps if you don't run the right antifreeze mix. 20 minutes once I get under it. And then Denver. And then Denver. She nodded, looked back at her plate. I need to make some calls. Okay? Before 9. Okay. She put down her fork and looked at him directly. Last night. Was last night, Daniel said. He said it simply without shutting her down, just placing it where it belonged. You don't owe me an explanation. You don't owe me anything. Something in her face shifted. He couldn't name exactly what it was. Relief, maybe. Or something more complicated than relief, the particular feeling of having expected to be held to something and finding out you weren't. I said things I don't usually say, she said quietly. People do that in storms, Daniel said. I think it's the snow. Hard to perform when the weather's against you. That got her the ghost smile again, fuller this time, almost real. She looked down at her plate quickly, like she was trying to catch it before it showed too much. Hargrove, she said. The word came out flat and heavy like a door closing. I've been going over it since 5 a.m. His email didn't mention anything substantive, no specific risk factor, no clause, nothing I could push back on. Which means... It wasn't about the valuation, Daniel said. She looked up. Say that again. If there's no reason in the email, there's a reason he's not putting in the email. That's not a business decision. That's personal. Or political. Or both. He finished his eggs. Who else is on his investor list? Anyone who'd benefit from Meridian not closing this deal. Adriana went very still, and it was the stillness of a person whose mind had just shifted gears and was moving fast. Callaway, she said. Who's Callaway? A competitor, regional but aggressive. They've been trying to acquire 2 of the same client verticals we're merging to expand into. She reached for her phone. If Callaway approached Hargrove before he pulled the offer, if they offered him a piece of their deal instead. Then he didn't pull out because of risk, Daniel said. He pulled out because someone paid him to. I need to call Marcus. Who's Marcus? My general counsel. She was already dialing. He's going to hate me for calling before 7 a.m. He'll get over it, Daniel said, and stood up to clear the plates. He took the dishes to the little side table by the door, stacked them neatly, and sat back down with his coffee. He wasn't trying to listen. He just happened to be in the room. Marcus, I know what time it is. I need you to pull everything we have on the Hargrove-Callaway connection. Any filings, any shared board memberships, any conference appearances, any dinners. A pause. Because I think we got played. And if I'm right, I'm going into that boardroom in 4 hours, and I'm going to need ammunition, not a white flag. Another pause. Longer. Yes, I'm serious. No, I haven't slept. That's not the point. Call me back in 30 minutes. She hung up. She was different now. Not transformed, she hadn't become someone else. But whatever had been sitting heavy on her at 2:47 in the morning had shifted. It was still there. But she was carrying it differently. Like she'd adjusted her grip. If you're right, Daniel said, and Callaway is behind it, what do? You still lost the deal. I lost Hargrove, she said. Not the deal. Hargrove was one of 4 lead investors. If I can show the board that his exit was sabotage and not legitimate risk assessment, they won't panic. They'll hold, and I can go back to the other 3 and close without him. You'd take a hit on the total cap. 12%. Maybe 10 if I negotiate well. She picked up her coffee. Versus Callaway absorbing the market position we've spent 19 months building. She shook her head. That's not a real choice. Daniel watched her. You already knew this when you woke up this morning, didn't you? She paused. I knew it at about 3 a.m., she said. After. She stopped. After you slept, he said. After I slept, she agreed. He nodded, drank his coffee. Then why? He stopped himself. Why was I falling apart at midnight? She looked at him directly. No apology in it, no embarrassment, just acknowledgement. Because knowing what to do and having the strength to do it aren't the same thing. And I'd been running on empty for a long time before last night. Daniel understood that. He understood it the way he understood engine failure, not as a sudden catastrophe, but as the result of too many small things going unaddressed for too long until one cold night on a mountain pass, something just stopped. The merger was supposed to be the finish line, she said. Not the start of something. The finish line. After that I was going to... She pressed her lips together. It doesn't matter. It matters, he said. What were you going to do? She looked out the window for a long moment. The snow was still falling slow and aimless now, the way snow falls when it's almost done. I don't know, she said quietly. That's the honest answer. I told myself I'd figure it out after. But I've been saying that for 11 years. After this launch, after this quarter, after this merger. She set down her coffee cup. I'm 41 years old, and I genuinely don't know what I would do with a week that didn't have a deliverable attached to it. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, You'd probably hate it. She blinked. What? The week. You'd hate it. First 2 days, maybe 3. He leaned back in his chair. I know because I took a week off 2 years ago. First time since Caroline died. Lily was with my sister, and I had 7 days, and I did not know what to do with my hands. What did you do? Day 1. I reorganized my entire shop, alphabetized the parts bins, took 6 hours. A real laugh this time, short, surprised, genuine. She caught it quickly, but it had already happened, it was already real. Day 2. Daniel continued. I drove to a diner 2 towns over and had breakfast by myself and read a newspaper. An actual paper newspaper. Like it was 1987. And by day 3 I was okay, he said. By day 4 I was better than okay. I took Lily to the zoo and didn't check my phone once. He paused. That was the best day I'd had in 3 years. Adriana was quiet. The problem, she said carefully, is that I'm not sure I have a zoo equivalent. You'll find one, he said, if you let yourself look. She studied him. You're not what I expected. I know. You expected someone who'd complain about the room situation all night. I expected someone who'd make me feel guilty for taking up space. She said it simply without drama. That's what usually happens. People see the chair and they get uncomfortable and they start compensating, and it comes out sideways as impatience or pity, or this particular kind of over-cheerfulness that makes me want to throw something. I'm not patient enough for pity, Daniel said. And I don't do cheerful before 7 a.m. I noticed. And you're not taking up space. You're in the room. That's different. She looked at him for a long moment. The charcoal eyes, usually so guarded, were doing something he hadn't seen them do yet. They were just open, undefended, like she'd forgotten for a second to put the armor back on. Daniel, she said. Yeah. Thank you. For last night. For... She shook her head slightly. I don't usually... I know, he said. Me neither. Her phone rang. She looked at Marcus, and then looked at Daniel. He gestured toward the phone with his coffee cup. Go ahead. She answered it. He took his coffee and went to sit on the edge of his bed, far enough away to give her room. He pulled out his own phone and called his sister. Sarah picked up on the second ring. "Danny, thank God. Lily's been asking for you since 6. "Put her on," he said. There was shuffling. A pause. Then a small voice, serious in the way only 7-year-olds can be serious when they've been worried. "Daddy, are you okay?" Aunt Sarah said there was a storm. "I'm okay, Bug. I'm warm. I found a good place to stay." Did you find someone to stay with? Aunt Sarah says strangers are scary, but also sometimes they're just people. Daniel felt something move in his chest. Aunt Sarah's right about that. Are they nice? The stranger. He glanced across the room. Adriana was talking to Marcus. Voice clipped and fast legal pad appearing from nowhere, pen moving. She caught him looking and raised one eyebrow, half question, half challenge, and he shook his head slightly, like nothing, just checking. "Yeah," he told Lily. "Pretty nice." "Good. Daddy, I drew a picture for you. It's our house with snow on it. Can I show you when you get home?" "You can show me as soon as I get there." "Promise." "Promise." He heard her exhale in relief, that particular 7-year-old exhale that means the universe has been confirmed to still be in order, and then she said, "Okay, hurry, I love you. Bye." And she was gone back to whatever she was doing, because children have the extraordinary ability to move between catastrophe and serial with no transition. Daniel sat with the phone in his hand for a second. "I love you. Bye." No preamble, no residue. Just love, and then forward. He thought about what Adriana had said. "I genuinely don't know what I would do with a week that didn't have a deliverable attached to it." He thought about how that sounded. And then he thought about how he'd probably sounded exactly like that before the week with the parts bins and the paper newspaper in the zoo. Across the room, Adriana said sharply into her phone, "Then get me the filing date on that board appointment. If it's within 6 months of the Hargrove conversations, we have him." "Yes, I'll wait." She pulled the phone from her ear and looked at Daniel. "It's Callaway. Marcus found a shared board appointment. Hargrove sits on a subsidiary of a Callaway fund. He's been conflicted this entire time and didn't disclose it." "That's not just a pulled deal," Daniel said. "That's a breach." "That's a breach," she confirmed. "Which means I'm not walking into that boardroom with bad news. I'm walking in with leverage." Her voice was steady. Her jaw was set. The exhaustion was still in her eyes, but behind it was something else. Something sharp and clear that Daniel recognized because he'd felt it himself on the mornings when a job that looked impossible turned out to just be hard. "You okay?" he asked. She looked almost surprised by the question, like it came from a direction she hadn't been watching. "Yes," she said, and then quieter. "I think so. Yeah." "Good." His phone buzzed. The tow service. Truck would be at the lodge in 40 minutes. He looked up at Adriana. She was back on the phone with Marcus, talking fast, building her case. She was brilliant, he realized. Not in an abstract way, in a watching it happen way. The kind of mind that could absorb a crisis at midnight, process it in the dark, while pretending to sleep, and come out the other side at 7 in the morning with a counter-strategy. He'd known exactly one other person in his life with that particular kind of intelligence, and she'd spent her last 2 years fighting cancer with the same focused ferocity, and even then she hadn't quit. He stood up, zipped his bag, pulled on his jacket. When Adriana finished her call, she looked at him standing by the door, bag over his shoulder. Something crossed her face, quickly, then it was gone. "Tow's here." 40 minutes, he said. "I'm going to go meet it." "Of course." She straightened her legal pad on her lap, squared the corners. "Drive safely. The pass should be..." "Adriana." She stopped. He wasn't sure exactly what he wanted to say. He wasn't a man who made speeches. He fixed things. He showed up. He took care of what was in front of him and didn't make it more complicated than it had to be. "The people in that boardroom," he said, "they don't need a CEO today. They need the person you actually are, the one who ate chicken soup with a stranger at 8:30 at night and was honest about being tired." She looked at him steadily. "That person," he said, "is the reason 300 people still work for Meridian and not for Callaway. Not the strategy, not the legal filings, her." Adriana Vale held his gaze for a moment that lasted longer than either of them planned for. Then she said, "That's not going to hold up in a court of law." "No," he agreed, "but it'll hold up in a conference room." She was quiet. Then, "Drive safe, Daniel." "Go get your deal, Adriana." He opened the door, stepped into the hallway, let it close behind him. He stood there for just a second in the quiet corridor of a mountain lodge with the muffled sound of a snowstorm finishing its business outside, and took a breath. Then he picked up his bag and headed for the stairs. The tow truck driver's name was Pete, and he did not believe in silence. He talked the entire way to Daniel's truck about the storm, about the pass, about a woman he knew in Vale who'd driven into a drainage ditch the previous February and hadn't found her car until April. He talked while Daniel assessed the fuel line. He talked while Daniel pulled the tools he needed from the bed of Pete's truck. He talked while Daniel lay on his back in the snow with his hands inside an engine that had gone cold in the night. Daniel let him talk. He'd learned that some people filled silence because they were nervous, and some because they were kind, and Pete was clearly the second kind. A big man with a gray beard and work gloves that had seen better decades, he handed Daniel what he needed before Daniel asked, and didn't crowd him while he worked. 22 minutes. Fuel line cleared, system primed, engine turning over on the third crank. Pete whistled low. "You weren't lying." "Never do about engines," Daniel said, and wiped his hands on a rag. He paid Pete in cash, tipped him $40 because the man had driven out in the aftermath of a blizzard at 8 in the morning without complaining, and then he sat in his truck for a moment before pulling out. The heat came on slowly. The radio caught a station country old stuff, a song he half recognized from somewhere. He didn't change it. He pulled his phone out. No new messages. He hadn't expected any. What would she have said anyway? Good luck with the fuel line. Safe travels. People like Adriana Vale didn't send texts to mechanics they'd shared a suite with during a snowstorm. They moved forward. They were built for forward. He put the truck in drive and headed for the pass. The board meeting was scheduled for 11 a.m. in Meridian's regional Denver office 14th floor corner conference room, with floor-to-ceiling windows that on a clear day looked out over the full Front Range. Today, the windows showed gray sky and residual weather, and the particular flat light of a morning that hadn't decided what it wanted to be yet. Adriana wheeled herself to the head of the table at 10:58. She counted 8 faces. Her CFO, David Kim, 26, brilliant, perpetually under-caffeinated, currently wearing the expression of a man who'd read Hargrove's email 4 times and still couldn't believe it. Her COO, Renata Flores, who had the composure of someone who had survived 3 corporate crises and 2 divorces and didn't rattle easily. Her general counsel, Marcus Webb, who was seated at her left with a printed file folder that was thicker than it had been at 6 a.m., and 5 board members, including Gerald Pratt, the chairman, who was 71, and had a habit of folding his hands on the table the way a judge folds them before sentencing. Gerald spoke first. "Adriana, given the events of last night." "I know why we're here, Gerald." She put her phone face down on the table. Her legal pad was already in front of her, the notes she'd made this morning filling the top 2 pages in her tight, precise handwriting. "And I know what most of you read in your email this morning. I wrote it." She had sent a summary at 8:45 a.m., 7 sentences, factual, no editorializing, Hargrove's withdrawal, the reason, and 3 words at the end, "I have more." Gerald looked at Marcus. Counselor. Marcus opened the file folder. As of 2 hours ago, we have confirmed that Warren Hargrove holds a board seat on a subsidiary of Callaway Capital Partners through a holding entity incorporated in Delaware 18 months ago. This appointment predates his entry into our merger process as lead investor by approximately 6 weeks. The room shifted. Small movements, people straightening in chairs, David Kim, looking up from his coffee, Renata going very still. He was conflicted from the beginning, Renata said. From before the beginning, Adriana said. He came into this deal already positioned with our primary competitor. The withdrawal last night wasn't a risk assessment. It was a play. Callaway wants the same client verticals we're acquiring in this merger. They needed us not to close. Gerald unfolded his hands. That's a serious allegation. It's a documented fact. Adriana turned to Marcus. Tell him the filing date. The board appointment was registered 14 months ago, Marcus said. Marcus, we have the Delaware filing a cross-reference to the Callaway Fund prospectus, and as of 40 minutes ago, a signed statement from a former Callaway associate who was present at a dinner between Hargrove and Callaway's managing director 3 months into our process. The silence that followed was the specific weighted silence of people doing math and not liking the answer. Gerald said slowly, "What are you proposing?" "I'm not proposing anything yet," Adriana said. "I'm giving you the full picture before I hear anyone in this room say the word exit." She looked around the table. Deliberately. One face at a time. Because if that word comes up in the next 5 minutes, I want everyone here to understand that we'd be exiting because a conflicted investor decided to sabotage 19 months of our work in favor of a competitor. And I want that to be very clear in the room before anyone decides that's something they're comfortable with. Gerald looked at her for a long moment. He was the kind of man who'd built 3 companies before Adriana had graduated from business school, and he had the particular stillness of someone who had learned the difference between a crisis and a noise. Right now, he was deciding which one this was. "The other 3 lead investors," he said. "Have you spoken to them?" "I spoke to 2 of them this morning. They're holding. They want to close. Without Hargrove, we're looking at a 12% reduction in total cap, which I can offset partially through 2 secondary investors who've been on the wait list for 6 months." She opened her legal pad to the second page. "We end up at 88% of the original valuation. Our people get 88 cents on the dollar instead of 100. But they get it. And Callaway doesn't get the client verticals. And Hargrove faces a disclosure violation that Marcus is ready to file the moment I give him the word." David Kim said quietly, "You'd actually file." "I'd file today," Adriana said. "But I'd rather close first, in that order." Renata Flores leaned forward slightly. "What do you need from us?" "I need a vote to proceed at the revised cap. I need it in this room in the next 20 minutes. And I need everyone here to understand that this deal is still the right deal for our company, for our people, for the market position we've been building toward since I took this chair." She paused. "Not the chair at the head of this table. The one I'm sitting in. Both of them matter. And I've given everything I have to both of them for 11 years. So I need you to trust me for 20 more minutes." Gerald looked at her. She held his gaze. He unfolded his hands and placed them flat on the table, a different gesture than the folded ones. Open. Decided. "Vote," he said. Daniel crossed the state line into Colorado's eastern plains just before noon.
That's so.
The pass had been clear, freshly plowed dry in the center lanes, just enough salt on the shoulders to make them gleam. He'd taken it at a measured pace, not cautious, but deliberate, the way he did everything when it mattered. The storm had moved east overnight and taken most of its drama with it. What was left was cold and clean and quiet. He called Sarah from the road. "How's Lily?" "Wonderful and impossible as always. She made me explain 3 times why snowflakes are all different. I told her it was because of science, and she told me that wasn't a real answer. She's right, Daniel said. Danny, she's 7. She's 7 and she's right. Sarah was quiet for a second. You sound different. I've been in a truck for 2 hours. That's not what I mean. Was the lodge okay? Who did you end up sharing with? You never said. He watched the road. A hawk was sitting on a fence post about 100 yards ahead. As he got close, it dropped off the post and opened into a long, flat glide without any apparent effort riding something invisible. Someone who needed a quiet night, he said. Danny. Sarah. I worry about you. I know. You never talk to anyone. You never let anyone. I talked to someone last night, he said. A pause. The lodge person. The lodge person. He heard her exhale, the particular exhale of someone processing more than they were being told, and deciding to accept the portion they'd been given. Okay, she said. That's good. Yeah. Okay. Tell Lily I'll be there by 3, he said. We'll go to that diner she likes. She'll want pancakes. She always wants pancakes. It's 2 in the afternoon. Pancakes don't have a curfew, he said, and Sarah laughed a real laugh, the kind she didn't do enough of, and they hung up. He drove. He thought about Adriana, the way you think about someone who's crossed your path at a strange angle and left something behind that you can't quite name. Not romantic. Not yet. He didn't do quick decisions about things that mattered, and people mattered more than engines. But real. She was real, in the way that very few people he'd met in the last 3 years had been real. Most people, when they found out about Caroline, went soft around him. Careful, like he was something that might break if handled wrong. Adriana hadn't gone soft. She'd asked him straight questions and listened to the answers, and then told him the truth about herself without being asked. He hadn't realized until last night how much he'd missed that. Just someone being straight. His phone buzzed on the seat beside him. He glanced at it, unknown number, Colorado area code. He let it ring. It went to voicemail. He was 10 miles outside of Denver, stopped at a light when he played the message. Mr. Reed, this is Renata Flores, COO of Meridian Group. Adriana asked me to pass along a message. She said, and I'm quoting directly because she was very specific about it. Tell him the vote was 17-1 and the eggs helped. I don't know what that means, but she seemed to think you would. That's all. The light turned green. Daniel sat there for a second, long enough for the truck behind him to tap its horn once politely, and then he pulled through the intersection with something on his face that hadn't been there in a long time. Not quite a smile. Something more than that. The feeling of a thing that had been set right, even though he'd only been a small part of the setting. 17-1. She did it. He thought about her in that conference room, whatever it looked like, wherever it was, with her legal pad and her gray eyes, and the armor she wore so automatically, she'd probably forgotten it was armor. He thought about Gerald Pratt, or whoever the version of Gerald Pratt was in that room. The older man, the folded hands, the careful weighing of things, looking at Adriana and deciding she was worth the vote. He thought about what she'd said at 3 in the morning. They need to know someone is still standing. She was standing. The Meridian boardroom cleared out by 12:45. Marcus stayed behind to talk timelines. David Kim stayed to run the revised numbers one more time, which was a David Kim thing to do. He ran numbers the way other people checked door locks. Renata had left immediately after the vote to start making calls, because Renata was a person who treated a decision as the beginning of the work, not the end of it. When the last of them filed out, Adriana sat alone at the head of the table. She looked at the empty chairs. 8 of them. She'd looked at those chairs from this position for 4 years since they'd moved the regional meeting to Denver, and she'd never once thought about what they looked like when they were empty. She'd only ever thought about them full. Her phone was face up now. The Renata call had gone out. She knew that. She wondered briefly if he was still driving. She wondered if he'd heard the message yet. She wondered, and this was the thought she'd been pushing aside since about 6 a.m., whether she'd ever hear from Daniel Reed again. She was not a woman who cultivated uncertainty. She did not enjoy wondering. She dealt in facts, things you could verify, things you could act on, things that meant something in daylight. And the fact was, this she had told a stranger things she didn't tell her therapist. She had eaten eggs she hadn't ordered and slept better after 3 a.m. than she had in weeks, because a man she'd never met had spoken into the dark with no expectation attached to any of it. And now, he was on a highway somewhere between a mountain pass and his daughter. And she was at the head of a conference table in Denver, and the gap between those two things felt both very small and very large, depending on which way she looked at it. She opened her phone. She didn't call. She thought about it. She actually had his number. The lodge had given it to her when she'd asked them to coordinate the wake-up call. A small bureaucratic detail she'd noted at the time because she noted everything, and which she now held in her hand like an object she wasn't sure how to put down. She put the phone face down on the table. Too soon, she thought. Or too late. One of those. Renata came back in. Investor 1 is confirmed. Investor 2 wants a call at 4. Investor 3's assistant said he's traveling, but they'll patch him in. Good. Renata sat down in the chair immediately to Adriana's left. Not her usual chair. She picked it specifically close. She set her own phone on the table. You okay? Adriana looked at her. Renata had been with Meridian for 7 years. She was the person Adriana trusted most in the building, which meant she was trusted with maybe 60% of everything, which for Adriana was extraordinary. I'm tired, Adriana said. You're always tired. This is a different kind. Renata studied her. Good different or bad different? Adriana thought about it honestly, the way you think about things when you've been up since 5 a.m., and you've just won a vote, and the armor has had a long 24 hours and is sitting a little loose. Good, I think, she said. Renata nodded slowly, the way she did when she was filing something away. The lodging last night. Was it manageable? It was fine. The storm didn't. Renata. I'm asking because I care, not because it's my business. I know, Adriana said. It was fine. It was. She picked up her phone and turned it over once in her hand, then put it back down. There was a man stranded in the storm. We had to share the suite. Renata's expression didn't change. She was good at that. And nothing. He was a mechanic from Denver. Single father. She stopped. He didn't treat me like I was something to be managed. The words sat there quiet and exact. Renata said nothing for a moment. Then, Adriana. Don't. I wasn't going to say anything complicated. It always sounds complicated coming from you. I was going to say that it matters. When someone does that, it matters, and it's okay for it to matter. Adriana looked at the far wall. Outside the windows, the gray had broken slightly, a line of pale blue, showing at the horizon, the way it does in Colorado in the afternoon after a storm, like the sky changing its mind. He has a 7-year-old daughter, she said. Okay. He made 2 trips to the restaurant downstairs to bring me food I didn't order. Also okay. He didn't ask me a single question about the chair. Renata was quiet for a moment. Then she said gently, "That's the one that got you." Adriana picked up her phone again, looked at the screen, put it face up on the table this time. "I don't know his number," she said. which was technically a lie, and she knew it was a lie, and some part of her said it anyway, because saying it out loud moved her one step closer to deciding what to do with the truth. Renata looked at her with the patient expression of someone who had known Adriana Vale for 7 years and understood the distance between what she said and what she meant. "You're a CEO of a company that just saved its 19-month merger deal by 7 a.m. on the day of the board meeting," Renata said. "And you can't figure out how to get a phone number." Adriana looked at her. "The lodge," Renata said simply. "He checked out. They still have his contact information." Adriana was quiet. "Or," Renata said, standing up and picking up her phone, "you can decide this is one of those things that lives in the storm and stays there. Some things are like that. They're complete the way they are." She walked to the door. Stopped. "4 o'clock call is Investor 3. I'll patch you in from your office." She paused at the threshold. "For what it's worth, I've worked with you for 7 years, and I've watched you walk into rooms that were actively trying to swallow you whole, and you never flinched. Not once." She looked back. "If this one scares you, maybe that's worth paying attention to." Then she was gone. Adriana sat alone at the head of the table. The phone was face up in front of her. She picked it up, went to her contacts, scrolled to the L's she'd saved the lodge number when she'd made the reservation 2 weeks ago, a different life ago. She pressed call. It rang twice. "Mountain View Lodge, this is Adriana Vale. I checked out of your suite this morning. Room 14. I need the contact information for the other guest." A pause. "Ma'am, we don't usually—" "I know," she said. "But I think he may have left something behind." Another pause. Keyboard sounds. "Mr. Reed, Daniel Reed." "Yes." More keyboard sounds. Then, "I can see a number on the reservation, but I'd need to—" "I'll hold," she said. She held. She looked out at the pale blue line on the horizon. She thought about what she'd told him at 2:47 in the morning in the dark when she'd thought he was asleep. "I don't know if I can do it anymore." And the way he'd said without hesitation, without consolation, without any of the careful management she was used to, "You don't have to hold it that tight." The clerk came back, read her a number. She wrote it on the corner of her legal pad, the same one she'd used for Marcus's notes at 6 a.m., the same one she'd carried into the boardroom, the same one that still had the words Hargrove, Callaway, Delaware filing written at the top. She tore the corner off, folded it once, put it in her jacket pocket, stood down from the table. She had a 4 o'clock call to prepare for, and 2 secondary investors to reach before that, and 37 emails in her inbox, and a company that had just come back from the edge and needed someone to be steady at the center of it. But in her jacket pocket, folded once, was a number. And for right now, that was enough. Daniel got to Sarah's house at 3:14. Lily was waiting on the porch steps in her winter coat and boots, which meant she'd been watching the driveway for at least 20 minutes, which meant Sarah had probably told her 3 times to come inside, and she'd refused each time. She was her mother's daughter in that way. Once she'd decided to wait for something, she waited. She hit the truck door before he'd fully stopped. "Daddy." He got out, and she launched herself at him the way she always did. No hesitation, no calculation, just full-speed belief that he would catch her. He did. He always did. He picked her up, and she locked her arms around his neck and squeezed like she was trying to make sure he was real. "You smell like the garage," she said into his shoulder. "I was working on the truck." "In the snow. In the snow." She pulled back and looked at his face with that serious 7-year-old scrutiny, the kind that misses nothing and judges nothing and just sees. "You look tired." "I am a little," he said honestly. He didn't lie to her about the small things. Carolyn had said that was the only way she'd learn to believe you about the big ones. Aunt Sarah made soup, Lily said. But I told her you'd say pancakes. You were right, he said. We'll do both. Soup now, pancakes at the diner. Is that allowed? I'm the dad. I decide what's allowed. She seemed to consider the legal weight of this. Then she nodded satisfied and wriggled down out of his arms and ran back toward the house. Aunt Sarah pancakes and soup, Daddy said. Daniel stood in the driveway for a second with cold air in his lungs and the last of the afternoon light going flat and gray across the front yard. He pulled his phone out. No messages. He put it back in his pocket and went inside. The pancakes happened at 5:30 at a diner on Morrison Road that Lily had decided somewhere around age 4 was the best restaurant in the world. It had red vinyl booths and a jukebox that played Patsy Cline and a waitress named Gloria, who always remembered that Lily wanted extra butter on the side, not melted on top. Lily ate with both elbows on the table, which Daniel didn't correct, because some battles weren't worth the real estate, and she told him everything that had happened at Aunt Sarah's the Snow. The picture she'd drawn, the argument she'd had with Sarah's cat, and a very detailed account of a dream she'd had about a horse who could talk, but only in Spanish, which Daniel listened to with full attention, because it was objectively a better story than anything he'd heard that week. Daddy, she said, cutting into her second pancake. Did you make a friend in the storm? He looked up from his coffee. What makes you ask that? Because you said the stranger was nice, and you sound like you do when you've been talking to someone real. She tilted her head. You sound different than when you're just at the shop. He looked at his daughter, 7 years old, watching him with eyes that were green like Caroline's, and sharp, like nobody he'd ever been able to identify specifically, and he thought not for the first time that she was going to be an extraordinary person when she grew up. And also that she was already an extraordinary person right now, and he needed to not miss that while he was waiting for it. Maybe a little bit of a friend, he said. Lily nodded like this confirmed something she'd already known. Good. You need more friends. I have friends. Pete from the shop doesn't count. He's a coworker. Pete is... Daniel stopped. How do you even know the word coworker? School. She soaked a piece of pancake in syrup with complete concentration. Is the friend a boy or a girl? A woman, he said. She's a CEO. Lily looked up. What's that? It means she runs a company, a big one. Like a boss. The biggest boss, he said. Lily considered this seriously. Is she nice? Daniel thought about chicken soup requested flatly at 8:45 at night. He thought about, you're dripping on the floor, and I'm always serious, and a voice saying in the dark, barely above a whisper, thank you. He thought about 17-1, and the eggs helped. Yeah, he said. She's nice. Different kind of nice than you're used to. But yeah. Lily seemed satisfied. She went back to her pancakes. You should call her. You don't know her number. You probably do, Lily said with the absolute unearned confidence of someone who has never once doubted that the adults around her have basic information management under control. Daniel drank his coffee. He probably did. He didn't call that night. He put Lily to bed at 8:30. 2 books the specific stuffed rabbit named Gerald, who had to be arranged a specific way, the lamp on low, and then he sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold in front of him and his phone a foot away. He was a man who thought before he acted. Not out of cowardice, he'd made fast decisions under pressure his whole life in the shop as a parent, in the years after Caroline, when there had been no time to be slow about anything. But the things that mattered to him, he turned over carefully. Like an engine part you're not sure about. You don't force it. You look at it from every angle first. What he knew. She was brilliant and exhausted and defended, like a city, that had been under siege for so long it had forgotten what peace felt like. She was also, underneath all of that, one of the most honest people he'd spoken to in 3 years. And honest was the thing he had the hardest time finding. People were kind to him. People were careful with him. Nobody was just honest with him the way she'd been honest, clear-eyed, and unsentimental and real. What he didn't know was whether the honesty had been a product of the storm. Whether the mountain lodge and the blizzard and the single available suite had created a particular pressure, the way deep water creates pressure, that had made things possible that wouldn't be possible in normal air. Some things only existed under specific conditions. He knew that. He'd seen it in metals that behaved differently under heat compounds that only bonded in cold. The question was whether what had passed between them was a storm compound, real in the moment, gone when the conditions changed. He picked up his phone, put it back down. Then he thought about what she'd said to him at 7 a.m, standing at the door bag over his shoulder. "Drive safe, Daniel. Not nice to meet you. Not thanks for the soup." His name, like she meant the specific him, not the general situation. He picked up the phone. He went to his recent calls. Not her number, he didn't have her number. But he had the number Pete, the tow driver, had called from. He had the lodge number from the missed call coordination. His phone buzzed in his hand. Unknown number. Colorado area code, but different from the Renata call. He stared at it for 1 full second. Then he answered. "Hello." A pause, shorter than it felt. "It's Adriana." He let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. "I know." "You knew." "Colorado area code, different from Renata's." Another pause. "You saved Renata's number." "She left me a voicemail about eggs. Seemed worth having." He heard something on her end that might have been a breath, might have been a laugh that didn't fully commit. "I got your number from the lodge. I told them you'd left something behind." "Did I?" A beat. No. That was "I needed a reason" that didn't sound like what it was. "What was it?" "I wanted to call you and I didn't have your number, and asking for it outright felt..." She stopped. He could feel her on the other end of the line doing the same thing he'd been doing at the kitchen table for the last 40 minutes, weighing it, turning it over. "It felt like something I might talk myself out of if I waited." Daniel moved from the kitchen table to the couch, sat down, put his feet up on the coffee table because Caroline had always hated that, and now there was no one to mind. "How'd the 4 o'clock call go?" he asked. "Investor 3 is in. We're closing at 89.5% of original cap. I got him up from 86. 3.5 points in one phone call." "He'd had a good lunch," she said, and this time the laugh was real short, dry, actual. "Congratulations," Daniel said. He meant it the way you mean it when you watched someone fight for something and saw them win. Not politely, genuinely. "Thank you." A pause. "How's the truck?" "Running. 22 minutes once I got under it." "You said 20. "I said 20 minutes. Took 22. I don't round." "No," she said. "I don't think you do." The kitchen was quiet. Down the hall, Lily was asleep, making the house breathe differently than it did when she was awake. He'd always been able to feel it, the particular settled weight of a sleeping child in the building. "Lily's down," he said. It wasn't a segue. It was just what was true right now. "Good day." "Pancakes at the diner. She told me about a dream involving a bilingual horse." "I'm sorry." A horse that spoke Spanish. She was very invested in the details. Adriana was quiet for a moment. "I know." "She sounds remarkable." "She's something," Daniel said. Another silence, but not empty, the kind of silence that has weight in it, the way good conversations have weight in their pauses. I told Renata about you, Adriana said. What did you tell her? That you were stranded in the storm, that we shared the suite, that you... A pause. That you said something I needed to hear. What did she say? She told me to get your number from the lodge, in different words. Smart woman? Insufferably, Adriana said, and it was the warmest he'd heard her yet. Daniel turned his coffee mug between his palms. Adriana. What? I'm glad you called. A silence that felt like something landing. I almost didn't, she said quietly. I know, I almost called you first. You didn't have my number. I was working on it. She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was a little different, lower, more careful, the way voices get when you've decided to walk out onto ice and you're still checking the thickness. I don't do this well. Do what? This. A short pause. Whatever this is. Neither do I, he said. I haven't. He stopped. It's been a long time since I called anyone just to talk. Me too. Okay, he said. Then we're both bad at it. Seems fair. Another one of those silences. He was starting to catalog them, the hostile ones, the thinking ones, the ones that meant she was deciding something, the ones that meant she'd already decided, but wasn't sure how to say it. This one was the last kind. Denver, she said. Meridian's regional office is here. I'm here 3, sometimes 4 days a month. I know Denver, he said. I live here. I know you live here. A beat. I'm here next Thursday through Saturday. I keep the schedule full. There's always something to... She stopped herself, started again. I'd like to have dinner. He was quiet for a moment, not because he was uncertain, but because he wanted to be sure she could hear that he wasn't. Yeah, he said. I'd like that. Not a hotel restaurant, she said immediately. I've had enough of those. I know a place on Morrison Road, red booths, good food, jukebox. Does the jukebox work? Plays Patsy Cline. I can live with Patsy Cline, she said. 6 o'clock. 6:30. I have a 5 o'clock call that runs long. 6:30, he agreed. I'll text you the details for which days. Okay. A pause. Daniel. Yeah. The thing you said this morning, about the boardroom, that they needed the person I actually was, not... She stopped. I've been thinking about it all day. And I think it was the most useful thing anyone has said to me in about 4 years. The words came out measured and deliberate, which was how he'd learned she said the things that cost her something, which is either a compliment to you or a commentary on the people around me. Probably both. Probably both? He agreed. I'm not... She paused. I'm not easy. I need you to know that going into Thursday, I work long hours. I don't turn the phone off. I run at a pace that most people find exhausting to be around. I have a complicated life, and a lot of it's mine, and it takes up space, and I don't apologize for it. Adriana, he said. What? I spent 3 years fixing everything alone. Running a shop, raising a kid, maintaining a house, keeping a business running. I go to bed tired every night, and I get up and do it again. He paused. I'm not looking for easy. Easy's never been on the menu. A long quiet. Then she said, she's going to want to know where you went Thursday. Lily. If she's as perceptive as a child who knows the word coworker and correctly identifies when you've been talking to someone, real yes. He smiled. He hadn't smiled much in the last 3 years. He'd laughed Sarah could always get him there, but smiling was a different thing. Smiling was slower, quieter, more his own. "I'll tell her I'm having dinner with the CEO friend," he said. "What will she say?" "She'll want to know if you're nice. And you'll say." "What I said this afternoon," he told her. "Different kind of nice. But yeah." Another silence. And in it, something settling the way a structure settles when all its weight finally finds its right distribution. Not perfect, not finished, but balanced. "Get some sleep," she said. "You too." "I have 3 emails. Adriana." "They're short." "Adriana." A pause. "Fine. After the emails." "Good night," he said. "Good night, Daniel." He hung up and sat in the quiet living room for a moment. The coffee was completely cold. The house was still. Down the hall behind the door with the hand-painted wooden letters spelling Lily. His daughter was asleep with her specific rabbit, arranged specifically dreaming whatever she dreamed about. Spanish-speaking horses, snowflakes, the ordered and generous world she carried around inside her like it was the only world that existed. He put the coffee mug in the sink, turned off the kitchen light. On his way to bed, he stopped at her door, didn't open it, just stood there for a second, hand on the frame. "I'm here, Bug," he thought. Still here. Thursday came the way weeks come when you're paying attention to them steadily without drama, each day doing its work. Monday, he had an engine rebuild and a transmission job. Tuesday was school pickup and grocery shopping, and a broken dishwasher that turned out to be a clogged filter, which took 4 minutes to fix once he found it. Wednesday. Lily lost a tooth and put it under her pillow with a formality that suggested she knew exactly what the arrangement was, but respected the tradition anyway. They texted twice. He and Adriana. Short exchanges, the kind that don't mean much on their own and mean quite a lot in aggregate. She sent him an article on Tuesday about independent mechanics competing in the EV market. No message attached, just the link. He sent her back a thumbs up and then after a minute added, "Still not driving an EV." She replied, "Noted." That was it. On Wednesday night, she texted 3 investors confirmed. Marcus filed the Hargrove disclosure. Callaway is scrambling. He replied, "How does that feel?" A longer pause than usual. Then, like finishing something. Strange. He looked at that for a second. Then he typed, "Good strange" or "bad strange." She took a while, still figuring that out. He put the phone down and thought about what she'd said in the suite at the lodge. The merger was supposed to be the finish line. And now she was at the finish line, and on the other side of it was what 11 years of building something, and now it was built, and the question of who she was without the emergency was sitting right in front of her. He knew something about that particular question. He'd faced his own version of it after Caroline. When the crisis of grief finally stopped being a crisis and became just life. The reconfigured version. The one you didn't choose, but had to learn to live inside. He typed, "That's what Thursday's for." She sent back one word, "Yes." He was at the diner at 6:15. He didn't like being late to things. Gloria saw him come in and took him to the corner booth without being asked. The wide one, the one with extra space on one side, which he'd requested when he made the reservation, and which Gloria had arranged without making it a thing, the way people who've worked in service their whole lives understand how to do. He ordered coffee and waited. At 6:32, the door opened. She came in out of the cold with her coat buttoned and her hair down. He'd seen it down before, but only in the half-light of the suite, sleep-tangled and unguarded. This was different. This was her choice, the hair down. She was wearing a gray sweater instead of a blazer, and if the blazer was armor, then the sweater was something else. Not an absence of armor. A decision. She saw him and wheeled toward the booth. He stood. She shook her head once don't, and he sat back down, which was exactly right, and he thought she noticed that. She settled across from him, looked at the table, looked at him. "Red booths," she said. "Told you." "It's very red." "Gloria picked the corner booth," he said, without being asked. Adriana glanced at the open space beside her, then at him. Something moved across her face, something that wasn't quite what he'd expected. It was softer than gratitude, more complicated. "Tell me about the dishwasher," she said. He blinked. "What?" "You mentioned a broken dishwasher. Tuesday. Tell me about the dishwasher." He looked at her for a moment. "You want to hear about a clogged filter?" "I want to hear about something normal," she said. "Something that broke and you fixed it and now it works. I've had a week of very large things. I want to start with something small." He understood that completely. He reached for his coffee. "Okay," he said. "So the dishwasher." And Gloria came by to take their order, and Patsy Cline started up on the jukebox. Something slow and unhurried, and Daniel Reed started talking about a clogged filter to a woman who had built a company and almost lost a merger and called him from a conference table with a folded piece of paper in her pocket, and she listened to every word of it like it was the most interesting thing she'd heard all week. Maybe it was. Maybe that was the whole point. Gloria brought the food without fanfare, a bowl of tomato bisque for Adriana, a club sandwich for Daniel, a basket of bread neither of them had ordered, because Gloria had been doing this long enough to know when people needed bread. The diner hummed around them, booths filling with the early dinner crowd, a family with 3 kids at the big round table, a couple of older men at the counter with their coffees and their quiet, a woman in scrubs who ate alone with a book and didn't look up once. The jukebox moved from Patsy Cline to something Daniel half recognized, Don Williams maybe, or early Christopherson. Something unhurried. Adriana finished telling him about the dishwasher story's counterpart, a broken HVAC system in the Meridian Denver office that had been misdiagnosed by 2 contractors before the building manager figured out it was a stuck damper. She told it the way someone tells a story they didn't know they'd been saving until they had the right audience for it. Precise about the details. Dry about the incompetence. And underneath it, something almost like relief. The relief of talking about something small and mechanical and solvable in a world that had spent the last week being none of those things. 2 contractors, Daniel said. 2. And the damper was accessible from a panel on the 3rd floor, 6 screws. How long to fix it once they found it? 11 minutes. I timed it. Of course you did. I time everything, she said without apology. I know. He took a bite of his sandwich. You timed my fuel line. 22 minutes, she said immediately. You said 20. I said it would take 20 minutes once I got under it. Getting under it took 2. She looked at him steadily. That's a significant distinction. It's the only kind worth making. A small smile. Not the ghost this time, a real one, small, but actual, the kind that reached her eyes and didn't disappear immediately. He noticed it the way you notice a light coming on in a window you'd thought was empty. They ate for a while. The bread was good. The soup, Adriana reported, was better than it had any right to be, which she said in a tone that suggested she took soup quality seriously and respected when it exceeded expectations. How's Renata? Daniel asked. Exhausted and triumphant, which is her natural state. Adriana broke a piece of bread. She asked about you. What did you tell her? That we were having dinner. What did she say? she said finally, and then pretended she hadn't. Daniel raised an eyebrow. She said that after 1 week. Renata has opinions on timelines, Adriana said. She kept hers and my ex-husband's relationship calendar in her head for 2 years before I knew about it. She tracks these things the way Marcus tracks legal exposure, quietly, thoroughly, and with complete confidence in her own assessment. Daniel filed that away carefully, not the Renata part, the other part. Ex-husband. 4 years ago. She said it the way she said most things about her past: clean, contained, already processed. His name was Richard. He was an architect, very good at his work, very bad at being married to someone who worked more than he did. Did he? Daniel stopped. Say it, she said. Whatever you were going to ask. Did he leave because of the chair? He left because he wanted a different life and used the chair as the vocabulary, she said, which is its own particular kind of cowardice. There's never a shortage of men who can't handle a woman who doesn't need saving, but who will find a more acceptable reason to leave than that. Daniel said nothing for a moment. Then, that's a hard thing to carry. I don't carry it, she said. I put it down a long time ago. A pause. I just know where I left it. He nodded. He understood that. There were things from the years after Caroline that he didn't carry. Either the grief counselor he'd seen 3 times, and stopped because it felt like describing a fire to someone who'd never been cold. The well-meaning neighbors who'd brought casseroles for 3 months and then gone back to their lives. The particular loneliness of being surrounded by people who wanted to help, but didn't know how to just sit. He didn't carry those, but he knew where he'd put them. Richard, he said. What about him? He was an idiot. Adriana looked at him. Then she laughed, a full one this time, surprised out of her, the kind she'd been managing so carefully all evening, and now just let go. It lasted about 4 seconds, and when it was done, she pressed her fingers to her mouth and shook her head slightly like she was scolding herself for it. That's your professional assessment, she said. It's my honest one, he said. And I don't round. She looked at him across the red booth table in the diner on Morrison Road, while Patsy Cline or maybe Don Williams played on the jukebox, and the family across the room argued cheerfully about dessert. And she looked at him the way she'd looked at him once before, at 7 in the morning in the lodge suite, when he'd taken the plates to the side table and stood by the door with his bag over his shoulder. Like she was seeing something she hadn't anticipated seeing and wasn't entirely sure what to do about it. Daniel, she said. Yeah. I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it the way I mean it, not the way it might sound. Okay. She set down her bread, put her hands flat on the table, a gesture he'd seen her use in conversation when she was about to say something she'd thought through completely and wasn't going to walk back. I'm 41 years old, she said. I've been in this chair for 6 years. I've built a company worth more than most people will see in 10 lifetimes. I've done all of that largely by deciding that need was a liability. That wanting things that weren't professional, things that were just personal, was a weakness I couldn't afford. She paused. The night in the storm was the first time in longer than I can tell you that I sat across from someone and felt like I didn't have to be performing. He didn't say anything. He let her finish. I'm telling you this because I don't want to do this wrong, she said. Whatever this is, I don't want to be careful in the wrong direction, careful to protect myself instead of careful with you. A pause. I'm not good at the middle ground. I'm either completely closed, or I say something like what I just said, which is probably more than... It's not more than... He said. She looked at him. It's not more than... He said again. It's exactly right. That's what I needed to hear. A quiet moment. Outside, a car passed slow on the wet street. The night in the storm, he said, was the first night in 3 years that I went to sleep feeling like I'd actually talked to someone, not reported in, not reassured someone, not managed someone else's worry about me. He looked at her directly. Just talked. "You're describing a pretty low bar," she said quietly. "Yeah," he agreed. "We both are." She held his gaze. "What do we do with that?" "We eat our dinner," he said. "And then we figure out the next thing. And then the next one." He picked up his sandwich. "I'm not a man who needs to know the whole road before he starts driving. I just need to know the first turn." Adriana Vale looked at Daniel Reed across a red vinyl booth in a diner on Morrison Road with a jukebox playing behind them and a basket of bread between them and 6 years of careful living behind her and 3 years of quiet endurance behind him, and she said, "Turn left." He smiled. The full version. The slow, quiet one that was entirely his. "Left it is," he said. They stayed at the diner until 8:45. Gloria refilled their coffees 3 times without being asked, and at some point brought them a slice of apple pie to share unprompted with the explanation that it's Thursday and Thursday deserves pie. Neither of them argued. They talked about things that didn't have weight and things that had all the weight in the world and moved between them without it feeling like a shift. He told her about the shop, how he'd started it over from scratch after his partner took the deal one client at a time, building a reputation on the kind of honesty that costs you jobs in the short run and earns you everything in the long one. She told him about the early days of Meridian the office that was a single room above a tax preparation service. The first investor meeting she'd taken 3 weeks after the accident, while still in a rehabilitation facility, arriving in a borrowed hospital chair, because her own hadn't been delivered yet, and refusing to reschedule because she'd already rescheduled everything else in her life and she wasn't rescheduling this. "What did the investor say?" Daniel asked. "He said he was impressed. And I told him to stop being impressed and start writing a check." "Did he?" "He wrote 2, she said. He shook his head. "You were 28 years old, 3 weeks out of a rehabilitation facility, sitting in a borrowed chair, and you told an investor to stop being impressed and write you a check." "I was 29 by then. The birthday was in between." "That's not the point." "No," she said. "The point is that the chair was in the room either way. I decided early that I could spend energy making people comfortable with it, or I could spend that energy on the work." She looked at her coffee cup. "Most days, I still think that was the right call." "Most days," he said. She looked up. "Some days I think I used it as an excuse to stop expecting anything from anyone. Professionally, personally. If you never need anything from anyone, no one can disappoint you. And no one can surprise you either," he said. She was quiet for a moment. "No. No one can surprise you either." He thought about the first night, about her in the lobby, arms folded, phone in her lap, not looking up. The particular posture of someone who had long ago decided that looking up was rarely worth what it cost. "For what it's worth," he said, "I think you've been doing it right and wrong at the same time, the way most people do." "Is that supposed to be comforting?" "It's supposed to be true." She smiled, the small real one. "It is," she said, annoyingly. At 8:40, her phone lit up. She looked at it, and he saw the familiar reflex, the reach toward it, the slight tightening of the jaw. Then she turned it face down. "Whoever it is," he said. "Marcus," she said. "It can wait 20 minutes." "It can wait 20 minutes," he agreed. And it did. Outside the diner, the night was cold and clear, the first properly clear night Denver had seen since before the storm. The stars were out in the kind of density you only get at altitude in winter, sharp and numerous, the sky doing its best. He walked beside her to where she'd parked a modified SUV, charcoal gray, neat and deliberate. The way everything about her was neat and deliberate. She stopped beside it. He stopped. I can do the 4 o'clock from Denver next Tuesday, she said. If Lily has school, I can do 6:30 again. She has school, he said. 6:30 works. Same place. Gloria will expect us. Good, she said. I like Gloria. Gloria likes you. She brought you extra bread. She brought us extra bread. Gloria brought you extra bread, Daniel said. She's been bringing me the regular amount for 4 years. Adriana looked up at him, a look that was trying not to be as warm as it was. So I outrank you at the diner. In bread specifically, yes. She shook her head, and the smile stayed this time all the way through. Tuesday, she said. Tuesday, he confirmed. She reached for her door handle, stopped, looked back at him. The storm, she said. I've been thinking about it all week. What would have happened if the pass hadn't closed? If you'd found another room? If... She stopped. I don't usually think about contingencies that didn't happen. I find it unproductive. And I keep thinking about it anyway. He stood with his hands in his jacket pockets. The cold wasn't bothering him. It was the good kind of cold, the kind that makes everything feel real and awake. Here's what I think, he said. I think the storm did what it did. I think the room was what it was. I think you needed a quiet night, and I needed to not be alone, and we both got something we weren't looking for. He paused. And I think the pass being closed was good luck. Doesn't happen often, worth paying attention to when it does. She held his gaze for a long moment. Good luck, she said. Best kind, he said. The kind that shows up uninvited. She opened her door, settled herself in with the efficient, practiced motion he'd learned to simply witness without making a thing of. Tuesday, Daniel. Drive safe, Adriana. She looked at him through the open door. I always do. I know, he said. I just like saying it. She closed the door. The engine started quiet and well-maintained because of course it was. He stood on the sidewalk and watched her pull out. And when the taillights turned the corner and were gone, he stood there for another second, just breathing the cold, clean air. Then he called Sarah. She answered on the first ring. Danny? How'd it go? Good, he said. Really good. A pause. Yeah. Yeah. He heard her exhale, the big sister exhale, the one that meant she'd been waiting for this particular phone call for longer than she was going to admit. She sounds from what you've told me. She's not what I expected, he said. She's better. Better how? He thought about it. Real, he said finally. She's just real. No performance. No, she tells you what's true, and she means it, and she doesn't make it soft to make you feel better about receiving it. That sounds like you, Sarah said. He hadn't thought about that. He turned it over for a second. Yeah, he said. Maybe. How does Lily factor in? She told me I need more friends and that coworkers don't count and that I should call her. She's 7. She's right. Sarah laughed. She's exactly like Caroline. Yeah, he said quietly. She is. A silence between them that was full and not heavy, the kind between people who share a loss and have learned to hold it without dropping everything else. I'm glad, Danny, Sarah said. I mean it. I'm really glad. Me too, he said. He hung up, walked back to his truck, sat in the driver's seat, and let the heat come on. He thought about Tuesday, about 6:30, and Gloria and the jukebox, and the way Adriana had said turn left like it was simple, like it was obvious, like, of course, this was the direction they were going. He thought about a folded piece of paper in a jacket pocket and a phone call made from the head of a conference table to a man 300 miles away because waiting felt worse than the risk of reaching. He thought about what she'd said at dinner. "I don't want to be careful in the wrong direction." He'd been careful in the wrong direction for 3 years. Careful to keep his grief tidy. Careful to keep his world manageable. Careful to make sure Lily had everything she needed, and to make sure that question never came around to him whether he had everything he needed. Because asking it felt selfish, or felt like it opened something he didn't have time to close back up, or felt, if he was being honest, like a kind of disloyalty to Caroline. Like wanting was a betrayal. But Caroline had been a woman who hummed while making coffee and wore yellow sweaters, and told him once early in their marriage when he'd been slow to ask for help on a job he was struggling with. Daniel letting things in isn't weakness. It's just how more things get to be yours. He'd been slow to understand that when she was alive. He was starting to understand it now. He put the truck in drive, pulled onto Morrison Road. The city moved around him, lights, traffic, the ordinary Thursday night of a place that didn't know it had a storm last week and didn't need to. Denver was a city that moved forward. He'd always loved that about it. His phone buzzed on the seat. He stopped at a light and glanced at it. A text. Unknown number, but he knew it. Colorado area code. He'd know it now. Gloria's pie was excellent. Tell her I said so. He read it twice, then he typed back one-handed at the light. I'll tell her Tuesday. 3 dots appeared. Then Tuesday. Bah. The light turned green. Daniel Reed pulled through the intersection and drove home through the clear winter night, and for the first time in 3 years, the quiet inside the truck wasn't the kind that pressed in on you. It was the kind that held you. Steady and wide and full of room for whatever came next. Lily was at Sarah's for the night. The house would be still when he got there. He'd heat up the leftover soup from Tuesday, which he'd frozen because he didn't waste food, and he'd sit at the kitchen table and maybe not look at his phone every 20 minutes. And in the morning, he'd pick up Lily, and she'd show him the snow drawing, and they'd have Saturday, which was the best day of the week, because it didn't have anywhere it needed to be. And Tuesday would come. The way Tuesdays did, steadily, without drama, doing their part. He didn't need to know the whole road. He'd said that to her across the breadbasket, and he'd meant it. First turn, then the next. That was always how it had worked for him in the shop as a father in every hard season he'd come through, by just continuing to be present inside it. You didn't get to see the whole road. You got headlights, and the 20 feet in front of you, and the decision to keep moving. He had headlights. He had 20 feet. He had a daughter who drew snow houses, and knew the word coworker, and believed with her entire 7-year-old heart that the universe was fundamentally in order, and that strangers were sometimes just people. And he had a woman who had turned her phone face down at a diner on a Thursday night and eaten apple pie she didn't order, and said turn left like she meant it completely, because she was a person who only said things she meant completely, and he knew that now, and it was exactly the kind of thing worth knowing. The storm had closed the pass. The room had been the only room. The night had been long and dark and honest in the way that only unexpected nights can be, stripped of everything performed, everything managed, everything you put on for the world, until what was left was just 2 tired people being true to each other in the dark. That was where it had started. In the dark, in the cold, in the only room available. And now the pass was open, and the sky was clear, and Daniel Reed was driving home through Denver with 20 feet of road ahead of him, and a Tuesday to look forward to, and that he understood now was not a small thing. That was everything.